Over 80% of our viewers are not subscribed. We'd love for you to join the community formally, so make sure to hit that button if you haven't already. Etihad Airways is an airline in the United Arab Emirates. While a relatively new carrier, they were only founded in 2003. They are still, though, an airline that has expanded quite quickly, something we've seen on numerous occasions for these carriers located in the Middle East. The next decade following its launch was filled with excitement, and as the airline entered into the 2010s, it was filled with optimism at what the future held. Potentially too much optimism, and a general eager to continue expanding. Unfortunately, the 2010s were riddled with challenges, primarily brought on by the airline themselves. Decisions led by the carrier almost saw them cease to exist, with billions of dollars lost every year before it entered into a recovery plan to turn around the fortunes. How did an airline that seemingly had it all go so wrong and nearly collapse? One of the most significant contributing factors that impacted Etihad Airways was its investment in fleet. While it isn't uncommon for an airline to invest in aircraft, carriers of course commonly do pour a lot of money into upgrading their equipment. Etihad Airways and the way they conducted themselves really did contribute to the downfall. The carrier splashed tens of billions in quite quick succession on some of the newest wide-body aircraft available, a decision that still to this day does really haunt them. Analysts, and even myself, will warn that expanding a business too quickly can have negative repercussions. In almost all cases, when those comments are made, thoughts will relay around Etihad Airways' situation. Significant investments in aircraft such as the A350 and the 777X financially hurt them, struggling to generate revenue and recoup the money lost. Etihad Airways started to spiral out of control, and in the second half of the 2010s, that was felt massively as they began to plummet into losses. We say plummeting because their financial situation was quite unlike anything that we'd seen at the time, reporting yearly losses exceeding USD 1 billion, and even at the peak, USD 2 billion. It was quite staggering considering we had seen carriers collapse at that point for far less. Naturally though, the government backing definitely kept them alive a lot longer than maybe they would have been if they were in another location and didn't have as much government backing. The airline was eventually left with too many aircraft on order, which were all deemed to be surplus to their requirements. This resulted in a long period of negotiations between the airline and the respective aircraft manufacturers that it had ordered the units from, in this case Airbus and Boeing, as they looked to defer the delivery given their financial situation, or worse, actually cancel units that were included in the order, a necessary decision that did probably save them from complete collapse, no matter how hard it was to actually obtain agreements from all parties to cancel units. However, it must be said it wasn't just investments in aircraft that resulted in the airline reaching the lows that it did during the 2010s. Investments in airlines were another field that the carrier got completely wrong, notably investing in Jet Airways, of course an airline that used to be based out in India, and a full-service one that is looking to return. This airline very quickly went down a path that resulted in Etihad's investment being criticised. It wasn't just Jet Airways, though, that eventually collapsed. Air Berlin also collapsed, an airline that Etihad had invested in. Alitalia had been financially struggling for years, and of course now does not exist anymore. And there were many more poor business choices that many often wonder how actually got approved. These investments were part of Etihad's wider mission to create a global alliance of sorts. The only problem being that every single one of their investments was into an airline that either eventually A, collapsed, or B, had to undergo severe restructuring, hardly leading to, say, a profitable global alliance that maybe Etihad Airways had envisaged. Because of the repercussions from investing in these airlines, and of course their position in the industry, it actually only negatively impacted their own business even further, which at that point is something simply they just really couldn't afford. Etihad Airways also cited oil prices as another contributing factor that weakened demand. Under pressure against competitors like Emirates and Doha-based Qatar Airways, Etihad struggled to find ways to actually roll in profits, continuing to operate such a large fleet, finance eventual deliveries of aircraft, fill the flights, and so much more. It meant that the budget for these airlines were also much tighter than usual, and a lot tighter than years prior when they had invested tens of billions into projects, aircraft and more. Poor timing, therefore, led to the carrier only hurting more and really bleeding. Airlines like Etihad Airways are critical to the government. This can be especially seen in the Middle East. Abu Dhabi has connections globally, but they're made possible thanks to Etihad. The same can actually be said for both Doha and Dubai, with Qatar and Emirates respectively. Investing heavily was part of the goal to put the airline and location on the map even further, which resulted in specific investments reeling in losses. However, in trying to execute these plans, the airline wildly got it wrong. Responsibility doesn't sit on one person or group, but it was definitely apparent that we were nearly in a world without Etihad Airways because of these rapid expansion plans and the splashing of cash. For Etihad Airways, poor investments, oil prices, and much more contributed to their operating losses in the 2010s. While the carrier has been able to turn around things slowly but surely, it was not a turnaround that was smooth, and there were multiple scares surrounding the airline's feasibility and longevity of staying in the skies. The carrier, just before the pandemic, adjusted many orders, removed stakes in companies, and streamlined to become more efficient. On top of that, which is I guess you could say included in the streamlining, it got rid of a significant portion of its employees, existing aircraft, and even cut most of its global route network to slow down the business and turn things around. It was part of their 5-year plan to return to profitability that was delayed due to the global pandemic, but they're well on course to becoming once again a profitable company, which definitely shows that they made the right decisions in terms of cutting down and slowing their operations. But as we mentioned towards the midpoint of this video, it must be said that the backing from the government has no doubt kept them alive. They are too big for the government to just give up on because of the positive repercussions they have for the economy and the market there. Now though, every single decision that is undertaken by the Middle Eastern airline is thoroughly researched and planned to avoid what we saw take place in the past 10 years. While rumours have existed that Etihad Airways may look to merge with Emirates in the late 2010s, that never eventuated, and that's certainly a story for another day. But what it does do, and why it's a great point to leave on, is highlight just the position Etihad Airways was once in. If you have any thoughts, please do list them in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe to GlobeTrotting. There's much more analysis on the way, and we'd love to see you there.